But just to introduce my panel this morning once again, I'll start with Kefa Nyandenga, who's a member of the National Council of Churches of Kenya. We also have Peter Munga, an education analyst, also a member of the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Beatrice Maina, a research officer from the Africa Population Research and Health Center. And we also have Dennis Githinji, life coach and teenage mentor, and also a youth pastor, as well as Fadhili Msuri, the CEO, Kenya Muslim Youth Development of Kenya. And indeed, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've seen that report there by Rose Wangui, and those are startling statistics there from especially Kilifi County. But I'll start with you, Beatrice, from a research perspective, and you aided in terms of getting the statistics for this particular report. Is the number of is the cases of teenage pregnancies increasing or decreasing?
They are actually increasing. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are variations across the country, mm-hmm. but going by the trend, since if we look at the demographic and health surveys conducted mm-hmm. in Kenya, overall at the national level, the teenage pregnancies are on the rise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the prevalence, what is the prevalence within the county level?
The highest county, there should be, one of the highest counties has 40%. Mm-hmm. That is Narok County. Mm-hmm. And the lowest in teenage pregnancies, I think it's Murang'a County at 10%. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So that is according to the research that you've been able to do. Yeah. All right, Kefa, from being a member of the National Council of Churches of Kenya, I'd like to get your reaction to this particular report. And of course, Beatrice saying the cases are actually rising by the day. Why are there so many teen pregnancies? Who is to blame?
Thank you so much for inviting us for this debate. This is a very important matter mm-hmm. and needs to be given attention. Mm-hmm. Teenage pregnancy is on the rise, and one way of looking at it is to look for who is to be blamed. Mm-hmm. But the other way is to say we have a problem. We need to discuss it. And when you think about the demographic trends mm-hmm. and development stages about in our country, mm-hmm. you realize that many parents are increasingly taking up salaried jobs. Mm-hmm. Schools are not, teachers are increasingly mm-hmm. Focusing on academic, exam-oriented subjects. And the church, us in the church, we haven't really done as much as we ought to do. Mm-hmm. So everyone, literally, is to blame. And the young people are also not willing to listen, because mm-hmm. some of the information they are being taught about really include these matters. Mm-hmm. Whether one does science mm-hmm. in primary school, right. they will be told about adolescent stage. Mm-hmm. It's a topic in science, and they are taught how pregnancy occurs. Mm-hmm. So everyone needs to rethink and do much more to reduce these cases.
All right. Peter, and this appears to be a symptom of a much deeper issue. Where's the missing link?
The missing link is we have not had a national conversation about some of these matters. We are like ambulance chasers. We as a country and as a nation, mm-hmm. we like to react to issues when they occur. Mm-hmm. The teenage pregnancies is a matter that was coming. And many of us in the teaching world and even the researchers who are here, they'll tell you it's something we saw it coming. From the way our children behave, from our education system, the way it is kind of being run, you discover we have a system whereby there's more emphasis on the child than the teacher. There's more protection of the child than the teacher. So you discover what we used to see those days where anybody could even punish a child who is wayward. It's no longer there. As a nation, we need to have a national conversation mm-hmm. to discuss about not just teen pregnancies, but get to the root of the matter. And a national conversation here will involve talking even about something like about the new curriculum that we're talking about, mm-hmm. so that we are able to enshrine or entrench these kind of things into the constitution and also maybe into the curriculum. Mm-hmm. But right now, all we are doing is just groping in the dark. Everybody trying to, it's like those guys those blind men who are trying to describe an elephant. Mm-hmm. So one said it's like a snake because he only saw the trunk. Another one thought, so all of us are just struggling on what to do. But let us, all of us, the way we are seated here like a forum like this, have a national conversation. The church people are there, the teachers are there, the government is there, the policymakers are there, and we discuss issues like teen pregnancies and how to curb them in our society, not in our schools, but in our society.
All right. And Fadhili, you know, if Beatrice, you can agree with me, there was a downward trajectory some years back when it came to teen pregnancy, but something happened in between then. Then now we're seeing an upward trajectory on the same. I don't know, Fadhili, what would you attribute this to?
Thank you. Well, I think there's a lot of exposure currently to all manner of information and materials. And just as Peter has said and Kefa, even if you look at our school system, we really have that in-depth discussion about sexual and reproductive health. Our curriculum is focusing more on other aspects than focusing more on the reality of what these teenagers are engaging in. These numbers that keep increasing every year are not just from nowhere. It's an indication that there's a problem somewhere and there's a breakdown somewhere. Within the household, there's a breakdown of communication between the parent and the child. Within the school, there's a breakdown between the students and the teachers. Within the religious setup, there's a breakdown between the pastor, the imam, and the young people who are going to all these establishments. So I feel this breakdown partly contributes to all these issues. Lastly, if you look at the Kilifi case study that was done by the NTV reporter, most of the reasons that these guys are mentioning are issues if there was an environment within the home that they could open up and talk with their parents, maybe some that could have been avoided.
All right.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to that, which include free spaces and open spaces and mentorship as well. And talking of mentorship, of course, Dennis, you run a mentorship camp and you deal with teenagers over a long period of time. You speak to them. What would you say is the root cause of this problem?
Thank you very much. I think seated here, I would be representing teenagers. All right, a category of people that we hardly even understand. And the challenge with our society today is trying to solve what we don't understand. Today we are seated here possibly reacting to something we are supposed to respond to. And the sad thing is now we are trying to repair a generation that we are supposed to maintain. But it's not late. I would approach it from a different angle. When we talk of a teenager, it's also important to understand who we are dealing with and exactly where they are at. This stage is a crossroad to themselves. And at this point, this teenager is really struggling with an identity crisis. They're trying to fit in. And an existential question right here is, who am I and what can I be? Now, when you listen to these children, they will tell you, my parents don't understand me. Okay? They will say, my parents are not there. Because this is the assumption. Our parents have not understood what parenting is about. Okay? Parenting is not just a financial issue. Okay? It's both emotional, it's extremely intellectual, it's a physical issue, and parents need to address all these things together. So when a parent thinks that all their teenagers require is education and clothing, then it sounds as if we are doing them a favor. And most of our parents make the children feel like it's a favor I'm educating you. No, it's an honor, and it's a responsibility. I would say from an introductory part is, let's understand what we are dealing with and who we are dealing with. From that point, then we can solve whatever the challenge is. Because me to tell you, pregnancy is a result of what problem? Yes, this is just a result. What is the problem?
That's just a symptom.
That's a symptom. We need to address the problem.
All right.
Yes.
Beatrice, those very interesting remarks there and very important. Let's talk about the family setup now. Do you think parents have abdicated their responsibility when it comes to teaching their children the right behavior?
To some extent, yes. And I'm saying this because I think we need to start from a point where we are seeing sexual development as a normative process. These are young people who are growing up socially, you know, they're in a place where their bodies are developing everywhere. And they start experimenting with their sexuality. it's at this point where they need to be guided. Your
And
body
we
is
lack
actu-
that. Do we lack that? Do we lack that guidance?
We do lack that guidance, yes. And as parents, we've the way we communicate issues to do with sex or sexuality issues, we talk about threats. We are threatening them on, if you do this, you'll be beaten, you'll be chased away from home and all that. That's the kind of communication that we do have with young people. So I'd say if we look at it on the other side as a developmental issue and guide them through, this is what happens when you get to this age. This is how you're supposed to behave. That interaction between parents and young people is not there.
Is not there.
Yes.
And Kefa, do you also agree that apart from the parents, the church and the Muslim fraternity, have sort of like fallen back when it comes to, they were called the moral police or, guiders. Do you think they have fallen back when it comes to being part of the young people's lives?
I think the entire members, the core, or what we call influencers of the youth, of the children, caregivers and influencers, have fallen back, including the church.
Right.
The church is doing the much they can, but only to those who come. The church is trying their best. We are trying our best, but we are not able to meet every young person. And we are also need to go back and just ask what more is pending for us to do so that we address the problem. When it comes to teenage pregnancy, you will realize that what is required is what is called whole school approach. Whole school approach says this is not a responsibility to be left to teachers only. We have PA, Parents Association. Parents need to be empowered to know how, even if you want to help, how do you help? Because some parents, in the process of trying to help their children, that wasn't the situation. So they need to be guided, they need to be supported. And when you think about even what is going on in the national discussion about the CBC, one of the components which is very critical of this curriculum is what is called parental empowerment and engagement. It's provided for. And so curriculum materials are being developed alongside to be able to guide the parents on what do you tell your child when they are growing up. And teachers also need to continually do what needs to be done. And even as church, the parents, the churches need to. 64% of schools in this country were sponsored by the church. And if the churches are allowed, given the rightful space to do what they used to do traditionally, then they would also be able to improve the situation. But you know that for now, not all schools allow church.
No.
Even the church-sponsored schools, sometimes we have had a challenge with that.
Okay.
We hope that will be addressed with in the Education Act 2013.
All right.
Yeah.
And before I get to you, Peter, on the teacher's perspective on it, let's, Fadhili, let's talk about the religious perspective as well on the same. And do we really have safe spaces for these young people to speak on these issues? Are they getting the right guidance away from home, away from, the schools, when it comes to, the leaders in the religious sphere? Do they have the right guidance?
Well, I think, first of all, religion is supposed to cover the entire aspect of a human being life. From a Muslim perspective, we know we have the madrasa system of education that these young people go for their religious studies away from the normal schooling system. Issues to do with the larger reproductive health, sexuality and all that is covered, but I think to a very small extent. So there is need for the environment within these religious schooling to be expanded, to be friendly to these young people.
All right.
And also the madrasa teachers or even the imams, they also need to have the right information and skills to engage with these teenagers away from the religious angle, but also on all these social aspects. Because we are feeding them the right information on religion, but we're missing out on the social aspect of it. And that is why you're finding we're having an increasing number of these school-going kids getting pregnant. Then we're asking ourselves, where is the missing link? And the missing link is there is no information, they do not get the skills, the right attitudes, or even the value system that will enable them to make, informed and healthy choices in their sexual lives.
All right. Okay. And Peter, an interesting thing is the fact that teachers have also been blamed being part of those who cause teenage pregnancies. The other day, more than 1,000 teachers were struck off the register in the last 8 years of immoral behavior towards students, and these students were in the teenage bracket. Should we blame the teachers as well when it comes to this?
Yes, we saw that report, and it's unfortunate. First of all, it's not the teacher. If somebody behaves like that and is caught in such an act, let's not talk about the profession. That person is we call them a pedophile, He's not a normal person.
But remember,
He's
this
not a teacher.
This person
Yes.
has been identified professionally as a teacher, as a custodian of this young
It's happening in the
child.
school setup.
Exactly.
Yes, we have something at the Kenya National Union of Teachers called school gender-based related violence, whereby we address that kind of situation. And as you saw from Rose Wangoi's report in Kilifi, those children are ignorant. There's so much ignorance. When the child speaks, you discover this child needed just somebody to guide her or guide him. So what we need is not just that to blame the teachers. The teachers, yes, we cannot miss a bad apple or a bad person in a profession. Pastor Kefa here will tell you there are several. Sheikh Fadhili or my friend Fadhili will tell you there are several people in fact the girl named, I think in that report there was something about a Muslim madrasa leader. So these things are happening in our society. It's not teachers. We are talking about the borders. We are talking about church. Even in our own houses, we have relatives who are committed this kind of acts with our underage children. The thing is this. We need to empower our teachers, because teachers are actually, as you put it, the role models. They're where everything starts. If our teachers are empowered properly, if our teachers are well trained, and that's why we are boycotting some training going on called CBC, because it does not cover all these things that we're talking about. It's a wishy-washy kind of thing that is just being forced on people, maybe for some reason. But the issue, as I've said it, this needs a national conversation.
All right.
Can we, as a country,
Sit down
and discuss and agree this is wrong? Having children, pregnanting children like this is wrong. So that all of us come up with something, and we come up with a syllabus which we can teach in churches, in schools, in our homes.
All right. And Dennis, in terms of role models,
Yes.
do we lack role models?
Mr. Kefa, Mr. Peter, and Mr. Fadhili are trying to tell us they need to sit down and come up. But the challenge is, have we even asked ourselves, what do these kids want? You see, we are trying to help somebody without their involvement.
Beatrice, let me just get this.
Yes.
Beatrice, did you, as when you were doing the research, sit down with some of these teenage kids and listen to what the problem is they're facing?
Yes. Most of our research, we've sat down with the kids and we've talked to them. They've talked to us actually about the needs they have. And if you talk to a young person who is...
Beatrice, sorry, just hold on. That today on the discussion this morning is on the rising number of teenage pregnancies in the country. Our Rose Wangoi did highlight some of the cases in Kilifi County, one of the counties with the highest number of teenage pregnancies in the country. And of course, this panel will be having that conversation. Remember, you can also be part of it on our social media platforms. Our Twitter handle is at NTV Kenya, subsequently at Zainab Ismail. The hashtag, remember, is NTV Today. We'll be able to sample some of those views during the course of this live broadcast. And we were speaking about the same, Dennis, in terms of parenting when it comes to giving the right information and providing that safe space for young people to come out and talk about some of those issues that they are facing. You say we don't understand teenagers. How then do we start understanding them?
Thank you, Zainab. At this point, wish to address the parents now on parenting. Just like I said before, parenting or nurturing is not just a financial thing, because that's what our culture has for a long time embraced. And the best model for parenting teenagers, we would use a Swedish proverb: the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The best way to parent a teenager is by example. But now, Ms. Zainab, we live in a society where our parents have never done a mistake. They were all number ones in their class. I cannot be raised by somebody who has never made a mistake. If I made a mistake, how would I approach them? So I think we need to get to a point where we allow these young people also relate to us. I can't relate to somebody who is so perfect. So we have teenagers with challenges, but two perfect parents who don't know who to address our issue. And we also have parents today who have nothing to offer at all. They are full of instructions. I will tell you the truth, that children learn what they live. Teenagers learn from not instructions only, but patterns as well. So we don't have parents really portraying anything that our children can learn from. So they're busy giving instructions instead of becoming models. And they are too perfect. I cannot be raised by somebody I can't even relate to. Our parents didn't do a mistake, so they wonder why you do a mistake. But that's not reality. So I would encourage parents at this point to be real. Encourage your children. It's okay to make a mistake as long as it's the right choice. So let's allow our teenagers express themselves by we telling them, we also made this mistake, so we can walk through together this. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Quite candid when it comes to that, but that doesn't usually happen, and especially when it comes to our African society. Do you think we can be able to change that, Kefa?
The African society we are talking about is a society where the responsibility of child rearing belongs to everyone in the society, including the older siblings. And it was very clear what is expected of everyone. And casual sex was not one of them. And the responsibilities that goes to do with any who was involved in such was heavy. And so that's the African society you're talking about. When it comes to teenage pregnancy, we need to know that the young people, when the research that has been done is showing the nature in which this sex is taking place. Some of them are not planned. Most of them are not planned. They are accidental, and a lot of them, they were not aware of the consequences of unplanned and careless sex. We are talking about researches. Let me quote another research that was released recently by TIFA. TIFA is Trends and Insight from Africa. He did a research on sexual reproductive activities among the young people as well.
Right.
And in the research is showing that 3% of children, of these teens we are talking about, are not aware that the first sex can lead into pregnancy. Those are the questions we should be asking ourselves. If they're not aware, were they attending classes? And in the classes, are they being taught? Yeah. And the parents telling them that, you know, when you reach the age of puberty, you can actually get pregnant because the developmental stages that a young person goes through, they need to be familiar, and they need to be taking responsibility for themselves. Those are the kind of issues we need to be discussing. How can we empower young people so that they know from a developmental perspective that if I engage in sex at this stage, there are consequences.
There are consequences.
Yeah.
All right, Beatrice, let's talk about the stigma that these young girls actually face. Remember, this debate lies on a genuine concern that the girl child ends up being burdened with raising another child. So they are sort of labeled as social outcasts. What is the psychological impact of this problem to these teenage girls?
It's huge. The impact is huge. Let me start with when young people start having sex, or rather, when they start having sex, they don't talk to anyone about it. And simply because they are brought up in a way that the parents will always say, if you start having sex or if you're having a boyfriend or something, I'll chase you away from home. So they get to a point where they start engaging in sexual activity, but the parents think they are not engaging in sexual activities. They get pregnant. What happens? They run away from home because one, they're already labeled as immoral. They fear the parents will beat them. Some parents say, yes, if you get pregnant, I'll kill you. You'll bring shame to the family. So because they don't want to bring shame to the family, they run away from home. They're those ones who will be supported to get the process, give birth, and start raising a family.
But that's a small percentage.
That's a very small percent where the parents take responsibility of the child. But what about this other one where the parents are not able to take care of the child? They drop out of the school. Or there are also complications. They may die in the process of giving birth. Their bodies are not in a place where they're supposed to be carrying another being. So the society will label them as, do not associate with the girls of so-and-so, they are immoral. So there's a lot of this stigma that goes on. In school, even if they go back to school, they're also labeled the bad girls. So even attending classes, it's a problem. They'll drop out of school because the society, whether at school, whether at home, whether at church, has already stigmatized them.
And then this also affects the transition rates when it comes to, schools. And Fadhili, when it comes to some of the issues that we're discussing here, we've talked about the stigma. Let's now talk about something very sensitive when it comes to sexuality education. And this was a proposal by the government to introduce a comprehensive sexuality education within our school system, but that also has been opposed from the religious perspective and the religious leaders in the country, saying this will end up creating more problems than we intend to solve. What is your perspective on this issue? What is your reaction to this?
Well, it is unfortunate that the whole debate about comprehensive sexuality education is being reduced to issues about the understanding about the whole title and the issue about permissibility. But if you were to take a keen look on what exactly do we mean when we talk about comprehensive sexuality education, we know that the whole idea is to give the students the right knowledge, skills, attitude, and values that can help them to make appropriate and healthy choices in their sexual lives. And the intention is very clear, that this understanding will prevent them from, some of these risky behaviors that leads them to contract some of STIs, teenage and unwanted pregnancies. And we know that with CSE, it contributes more, even in ending cases of domestic and sexual based violence. So I think the whole issue is about the title. Because some will ask you, what is comprehensive about this comprehensive? Can you unpack the word comprehensive? We have seen opponents of CSE talking about issues that we are introducing or encouraging sexual activity among school-going children or introduce this kind of an education. But if you look at the reality is that even without introducing this, we are witnessing increasing cases of these students engaging in premarital sexual activities, and the results are evident with the high number of teenage pregnancies. So the question we need to ask ourselves, with the proponents and those who oppose, is what is the middle level ground that needs to be taken, because the focus should be on this adolescent girl child and the boy child, not as religious leaders or us as political leaders or the civil society, who should do what is best for this girl child.
All right. Peter, as a teacher as well, what is encompassed in, you told me earlier on that we do have sex education, but on a very minimal basis under the life skills education curriculum, I think. Maybe just give us an idea into what that encompasses when it comes to sexual education.
Yes, in schools right now, we don't have what we call sex education per se. We don't just teach sex.
Right.
What happens is that this is a subject that has been introduced by the Ministry of Education, known as life skills. And in this subject, teachers are supposed to equip learners with skills that can help them in life. And some of those skills involve things like, you know, how to behave when a boy or somebody from the opposite sex, you know, approaches them. So it is very mild. It is not as, you know, as focused as, you know, we are talking about. But again, as the child continues to progress in school, we have some lessons that come through biology class, which is more of a reproductive health. Now, in this kind of lessons, the teacher, the biology teacher, has the whole syllabus behind him to help him explain to a child the changes that are taking place in his or her body. Now, this one is it's syllabus. He can't go much into also how to behave. So you discover the problem is not, it is to do with the policy makers at the Ministry of Education. I don't even think it is now about just the religious churches or the Muslim brothers coming in. It's now more about the Ministry of Education coming up with policies and as we said some time earlier on, making sure that this lesson called life skills is even examined. You see, it's not even examined. So most teachers don't even teach it. Actually, you discover it's on the syllabus, but it is skipped because it doesn't add value in terms of examination or mean score to the school. So it's a lesson like PE. Now, the other problem I'll talk about is, yes, the ministry has allowed schools to allow girls who are pregnant to sit in class and maybe, you know, go ahead and do the exams. But the problem with it again is that the type of lessons that we teach in those schools make it uncomfortable for these children. For example, we have PE, where kids go for those kind of physical exercises. Now, when a child is pregnant, it becomes very tricky and almost impossible to have this child in your class, your PE class. So it all starts with, again, going back to all of us as a society and also talking about the ministry coming up with very direct, focused you know, syllabus on how to deal with sex and teen pregnancy in schools.
All right. Dennis, from how do we start changing this narrative and moving beyond the social and religious discomfort when discussing matters to do with sexuality among teenagers?
Mr. Peter said that sex education is not examinable.
Yes.
But Ms. Zainabula appreciate that in our society, when we go to school, we expect to learn things for the purposes of results. You see, so even when we teach these young people sex education, in their mind, they're already doing it just for results, not for life. Yes, they are taught these things in school, and that's where I would really acknowledge what the teachers do. But we were taught ever since we were young that whatever you're taught in school is not to help you in the future, but it's for you to pass exams. So even if we were to examine it, would it really change? So Zainab, I think our problem here is not sex at all. It's a moral decay. Yes, we need a moral revolution in this country.
Would you blame the society for that?
I would blame the society for it. Because do you know what these children want? What we do in mentorship. Mentorship has wrongly been defined. Mentorship is not telling people what to do. You mentor somebody when they start doing what they see you do. And we have a challenge from the government to the teachers to society to religion. Because now, for we Christians, if you take a teenager for a counseling session with the pastor, all the pastor is seeing is a demon. They're possibly possessed. But this young person has something they want to express. So we have to change how we handle it. For example, look at what the causes of teenage pregnancies are. Curiosity. Is it true? So how do we treat curiosity if not befriending the curious person?
All right.
Yes, and they want to experiment. And most of them are family-related issues.
All right.
Yes.
All right. And also just getting also your remarks, Kefa, from the NCCK, who have been on the forefront opposing the introduction of sexuality education in schools. Is that still the view that the council holds?
Yes, Zainab, what is being presented as comprehensive sexuality education is quite dangerous if you are to look at the content. One of the things that is proposed in that curriculum is that girls and boys at the age of 10 should be provided with contraceptives. and should be made available. Those contraceptives should be made available to them, and they should not ask any parent. So there's a inconsistency with the law, because the law defined a child as anyone who is under 18 years old. And so under 18-year-old cannot consent for anything. You get, the parents must give consent, but the proposals within the CSE itself says that the young people, it's at their right. Part of it is that they can decide that they should be facilitated to and allowed those who prefer to be, they were born boys, but they prefer to be girls. They should be allowed to transit to that kind. And when you look at also the content as presented, you will see that basically it is orienting them to practice sex. It is what is called sexualizing children. And we need to ask, who is really pushing for CSE? Who is pushing for it? Is it that we would want young people to be a potential market for contraceptives? And who is availing these contraceptives for these children? So this is why the church is saying, wait a minute, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, are they really ready for contraceptives? And have we really even discussed the side effects of these contraceptives? Isn't it possible for young people, rather than be concerned about what is called sexual risk reduction, sexual risk reduction, can we discuss what is called sexual risk avoidance? Just avoid sexual risks, rather than reduce it, because reducing it by using a condom.
All right.
And we are talking about pregnancy. You know, pregnancy is just one of the possible effects of sex.
All right.
Yeah. So pregnancy is really not the major thing.
The major issue. Okay. And because of time, I'd like just to get your closing remarks as well, and very briefly on what way forward then when it comes to this. And I know we have a lot to discuss, and we've barely just scratched the surface when it comes to the issues surrounding teenage pregnancies in the country. And just to get your closing remarks, and I'll start with you, Fadhili. What way forward then? What do we need to put in place to ensure that we're able to change this narrative?
We need to take this discussion further and forward, engage with the opposers who are opposing this introduction of this education. If there are those offensive clauses which do not apply, take them out. Or rather, we focus more on age-appropriate sexuality education, that we package it in a way that we feed these adolescents as per their age. Lastly, we also need to start focusing more on the push factors, especially on teenage pregnancies. Where is the boy child in this? Where is the border guy in this? Where are all these people responsible for this? We have focused so much on the girl child until a lot of stigma is on them at the expense of those responsible for that. So I think we also need to design an intervention to also reach out to these people who are influencing and luring these young girls to engage in this, and when they get pregnant, they run away. So the girl is left with the burden of shame with the family to go through all these. She misses out on her education, on opportunities, and all many factors that could have otherwise made her life a very good life in future.
All right.
Yeah.
And Dennis, your closing remarks and way forward, even as you continue mentoring these young people.
I believe that our greatest challenge with teenagers is not sex. Our society, just like I said, is suffering from a moral decay. Because Zainab, if we talk about sex today, tomorrow we'll talk about drugs, the next day we'll talk about totally a different vice.
So there is definitely an underlying issue that we need to address.
It's morality. The challenge is morals.
Morality.
Yes. So my advice would be, from a mentor's point of view, because we spend most of our times with these teenagers, this young person is just looking for somebody who can hear them out. And my advice to parents would be childlike, don't be childish. These little people just want somebody who can listen to them. And you know, the greatest question is at first, they're looking for somebody who would listen to them and trust them. This is our approach for mentorship. We tell young people, if you find yourself at midnight drunk, please call us, we'll come for you. We will not fight you, we'll rescue you first. Then we can talk about it in the morning. But we live in a society where when you do something wrong, instead of the parent responding, they react. So that's the problem. We have teenagers who have non-residential fathers and mothers who are never there, who are investing for them instead of investing in them. Let's listen to them.
Fantastic. And Beatrice, your closing remarks.
we cannot continue burying our heads in the sand that young people are not having sex, because statistics show that 30% of young people are actually engaging in sex. And for us to be able to address this issue, we have many stakeholders, including the church. They are a core part of the society that also needs to be brought on board. So we need also to listen to the voices of young people. What do they need? And when we talk to the young people, they want information. They want their sexual and reproductive health needs addressed, and that starts by giving them information. And I think the government has gone a step forward in having policies that address this challenge. But what we are lacking is actual implementation of some of these policies. We have the adolescent sexual reproductive health policy, we have the school health policies, but we lack proper implementation of these policies. And I think that's what we should look up going forward.
All right. Thank you, Beatrice. And Peter?
Yes. I just want to say that it's not just a matter of just the society. It's actually about also the culture that we are brought up in. From the research done with the groups like Beatrice and her group, Narok was leading and Muranga was the least. What are the unique features in Narok that are not maybe in Muranga? These are some of the things we need to ask ourselves. In Muranga, you discover many schools, you discover many people are more enlightened. And so you discover the problem also could be that the culture of where the child is raised also affects or brings about what we are seeing right now are called teen pregnancies.
All right.
But I want to say that teachers are playing a great role in helping children in schools.
Okay.
Teachers are providing them with a lot of education informally, not formally, but very informally. Teachers are guiding and counseling, and we are trying our best.
All right.
In our schools.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. And finally, Kefa.
Thank you so much, Zainab. The research that revealed that young people, teens are getting pregnant, also revealed that actually 15 to 19-year-old really, it was said that about 30% or so are pregnant. But the same research revealed that 15-year-old were just 3%. So meaning that the challenge is progressing upwards.
Okay.
What needs to be done very quickly is that we need to take responsibility. One, the government should enforce using structures already in place. For example, we have life skills education in programs in schools. Actually, the textbooks are also there in the schools.
All right.
Yes, they were part of the books that were availed. Personally, I'm also one of the people who wrote those books, and I know the books are there. The other thing that needs to be done is that schools should enforce PE. PE is not being done as much as Peter told us that it's being done. PE is under time to revise mathematics because PE is not examined. PE is very, very important from a health perspective. She will tell you that young people need to go for exercises. The other thing is about the parents.
Yes,
parents need to talk to their children, take responsibility. We are talking about nurturing children. The scripture says, in the book of Proverbs 22:6, train a child the way he should go. When he's old, he will never depart from it. Are we doing that? And if we can implement CBC, with permission from Peter and the rest, because in that CBC,
very briefly,
we have parental empowerment and engagement provided for. There is also community service learning. And the idea is let learning be fun, not just pressure for exams, and start examining from class 1. Let them go on to the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Kefa Nyandega, a member of the National Council of Churches of Kenya. We also had Peter Amunga, an education analyst, as well as a member of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, Beatrice Maina, research officer from the Africa Population Research and Health Center. We also had Dennis Githinji, a life coach and teenage mentor, and also a youth pastor, as well as Fadhili Msuri, the CEO of the Kenya Muslim Youth Development of Kenya. Thank you so much for coming in this morning to discuss this issue. Very pertinent, and of course the conversation will continue on our social media platforms. A lot of reactions from you on our NTV Kenya Twitter page, and we'll be able to sample some of those views as we close this live broadcast. But we also understand that the Anglican Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit is currently speaking at the Nairobi hotel, where the churches are stating their roles in fight. Okay, they were definitely stating their roles in the fight against corruption.